Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We have discussed about secondary data yesterday's lecture, and today we are talking about primary data. Before going into further details of what we will discuss in today's lecture, let me recap the previous lecture that we have discussed about secondary data and types of secondary data. Where do we need secondary data, and how do we use it? So first of all, we have seen that secondary data is of three different and distinct kinds. The one is documentary, the second is multiple source, the third is survey. And we have also seen that out of these three, then they have further categories, and within each category you have number of options to opt for and to go to collect data and to get data and to analyze data. So within documentary we have written and non-written materials. Within multiple source we have area based and time series based, and within survey we have censuses, continuous and regular surveys, and ad hoc surveys. And we have also discussed that within written and non-written material, the distinction is that maybe emails, written reports, publications, organizational databases, and communication such as letters and memos can also be written documentary secondary level data. While in non-written material it can be TV interview, it can be radio news, it can be voice recordings, it can be video recordings. While in multiple source we have discussed that it can be area based and time series based, and within area based we have discussed that it can be government publication, it can be a book, journal, or financial times of a country. While in time series it can be industrial statistics, manufacturing statistics, production index, agriculture index, and things like that. For example, European Union we have discussed a data called OECD database, and then of course books and journals. Within censuses we have population census, we have agriculture census, we have other censuses that can cover number of things, agriculture, manufacturing, and industrial census. So, and continuous and regular surveys we have discussed that in Pakistan we have long series of data sets that can be used one or the other way to get one or the other information. We have talked about household income and expenditure survey, we called it HICE. Then we have PIHS, Pakistan Integrated Household Survey, National Nutrition Survey, Demographic and Health Survey, and number of other things that we can use under surveys, and they are country level representative data sets that can be used to analyze one or the other thing. Ad hoc surveys are government surveys, organizational surveys, and academic surveys that are not usually on regular basis and that are done for meeting particular needs. And we have discussed that this is something that can be helpful for graduate level research also. So we have also talked about secondary data in the sense that we need secondary data and we can combine secondary data with cross-sectional or primary data to make it longitudinal or panel, and that can also have an impact on our analysis in the sense that we not only can compare units but also compare units over time. So it can be cross-sectional and it can be time based also. So longitudinal analysis, we have also seen the advantages of secondary data is that we not only can compare things but we can also contrast things, we can also contextualize, and we can also see differences and all that. And within secondary data we have also seen that it has some various disadvantages too. And now just to recap that documentary, survey, and multiple sources are three kinds of secondary data that can be used in a variety of ways, may be less current and collected for the purpose that does not match the research question. We have also discussed that the data that you want to use as a secondary data must not be collected for the purpose of what is your research questions or objective of your research, but it is meant for something else. And we discussed the example of unemployment rate, GDP, inflation, and all that, or stock market outcomes. that is not collected for a particular research purpose, but what is the meaning of this is that it's at national level or broader regional or bigger level or macro level, just to see how things are working in an economy. And that can be used for one or the other reason to justify your research, to answer some of the questions that you want to answer. Secondary data needs to be located and its availability established. So we have to see whether this kind of secondary data is available based on our research questions and objectives, and if it is available, can we have access to it or not. Data sources should be assessed for suitability, measured validity, and coverage. We have to see how much coverage is it. We have discussed the example of CPI, that is Consumer Price Index, whether it is suitable to do the analysis that you want to do, and whether it is measured in a valid way or not. So we have also discussed the example of inflation and Consumer Price Index, in which we have baskets of goods, and does that represents the average household in Pakistan or not. We have also seen how to evaluate secondary data. So evaluation includes reliability and measurement bias. So whether the data is reliable or not, and does it have any measurement bias in it. And we have also talked about cost benefit of using that data and alternatives that we can have. Costs and benefits of using secondary data should be evaluated and compared with alternative sources. Whatever alternative we have, is it easy to use that, or we have to use the same data that you want to use? Secondary data may contain some bias. It can help to answer the research question that we want to answer. And research project assessment regulation regarding the use of secondary data. Maybe the data that you are using as secondary data, your organization might not allow to use it because of its rules and regulations. So you have to check rules and regulation of using it, whether from the source that you are using does give you an allowance to use that data or not. And if it does not, you have to take care of not going unethical in your research methodology. Today, after looking at secondary data and its importance in our research, we are going to discuss about primary data. And within primary data, we are talking about observational surveys, observational interviews, observational data collection, and all that. And we will see how these things are very important for our research. Why do we do that, and what purpose does they solve for us? So observation as a data collection method. So observation is defined by Zonder et al. As observation involves the systematic observation, recording, description, analysis, and interpretation of people's behavior. So whatever you observe, whatever you describe, whatever you record during the interview, you analyze it systematically using behavioral approach, and then you interpret it. This is how observational way of conducting research is used, which is very important, especially in social sciences like anthropology and sociology, also in political science, but some other studies, some other branches of social sciences can also be used. It is also nowadays very much proliferantly used in finance and managerial side, because you want to observe the behavior of managers or the persons who work in, let's say, human resource management department, and then you try to interpret the way they act or react to one or the other things. How does it affect the quality of the organization, the image of the organization, and how it is important to actually behave in a way and give a policy guideline for those particular department where you have observational flaws. So we have various types of observational surveys or observational ways of data collection. There are two main types basically. Now one is participant observation, the second is structured observation. So participant observation emphasizes the discovery of meaning attached to actions. So it is qualitative in nature. It emphasizes the discovery of meaning attached to action. So what if you do a certain kind of action? How does it evaluate it? What meaning you attach to that? And you give that meaning a qualitative judgment, and then you count it, and then you move it further for analyzing it. And a structured observation it is concerned with frequency of action. So it is quantitative, how frequent that action was. When you attach a meaning to an action, it is qualitative, and it is participant observation. When you see the frequency of the action within your participant observation, it is called structured observation. And these two things are very important to understand, so as you will be in a good position to analyze data in a more better way. Participant observation. What is participant observation? Where the researcher attempts to participate fully in the lives and actions of subjects. So wherever you are going to conduct or collect data, whatever lifestyle these communities or these people have, you try to participate fully in their lifestyle, enabling them to not merely observe what is happening but also feeling it. So observation with your personal feeling also gives you an idea of participant observation. So these kind of studies are very common in anthropology and sociology, where you go to a village or a rural area or an urban area and you try to observe by living with them day and night for let's say few weeks or months, that what kind of lifestyle they have, what do they do when they wake up early in the morning, how do they sleep, how do they eat, cook, what happens when there is some happiness or happening, or there is an event of joy and pleasure, what happens when there is sorrow and pain, how do they act and react, how do they behave with each other, what is community customs, norms for marriages, what is community's customs and norms when somebody dies, what is community dealing, or how is community dealing when somebody is born. So these are the basics of life. How do the people organize their life within the context of their custom and culture? The researcher observes and become part of it, and then it sees what kind of various things he or she as a researcher can get or conclude from his participant observation. And that is basically the crux of what is called participant observation. And this definition is adopted from Gill and Johnson. We'll see the definition once again after looking this little detail, that where the researcher attempts to participate fully. So researcher has to participate fully in the lives and actions of subjects, and subject here means the people for which you are observing, or the participant you are observing, enabling them to not merely observe what is happening but also feeling it. So not only you are observing, but you have a sense of feeling for what is going on. As a researcher, you not only observe, but you have a sense of feeling into it also. Choice of participant observer role. The determining factors for observer's role are purpose of the research and time available, degree of suitability felt by the researcher, organizational access, and ethical consideration. So before we go into details, we have already had a full lecture on ethics in research. Why ethics are important, we have also discussed in our full lecture. But here I want to emphasize that because you are going and living within a community, so ethical consideration are very important. Number one, for your personal thing, and number two, for the organization you are representing. So if you are collecting data, if you are doing participant observation, you have to behave ethically, following the customs, values, rules and norms of the life of the people you are living with, so that they can have respect for not only you but for your organization you are working for. So whenever Next time somebody goes there to do one or the other kind of analysis or for any other purpose, he or she has safe, secure ground to do all the things. So your personal behavior and ethical behavior counts a lot for others to go and visit that place. That's why ethical consideration is very important when you start designing your research. When you start designing your research strategy also. So you have to take care of ethical consideration in that very purposefully and very seriously. So purpose of the research and time available. If you choose to have an observer role, you have to see whether the purpose of research is clear to you and what kind of time availability you have. So first you have to understand yourself what is the purpose of your research, how much time is available with you. Can you be in a position to do research, participant observation for let's say 6 months? If it is possible for you, you have to have in your mind what is your research question and what is the objectives of your research. Secondly, you also have to understand why you are going to that particular community or field area where you want to have a role of participant observer. So if you understand your role as observer, you will be in a position to link your role and the information you want to get from participants and the link of that information with that of your research questions and objectives. The second thing is the degree of suitability felt by a researcher. How suitable it is to go at that place, become research observer and take participant observation. Do you think it is suitable to do that or not? So degree of suitability is also very important. And then organizational access. For example, you want to do a research in an organization at, let's say, who is working for microcredit. So what kind of institutional hurdles you can get if you want to access that organization who is working for microcredit? So you have to see whether you have organizational access or not. And organizational access can also be understood in the sense that whether your organization allows you to work in that particular area or not, because if something happens with you, definitely organization has a strong role to play or responsibility to tackle too. So these are some of the things that one has to understand seriously, that does it make any difference or does it make any sense to go to that particular area or organization, and whether you have access to it or not. And if you have access, whether your own organization, institute or department allows you to go and behave as a participant observer or not. And if these three conditions are cleared, you are sure about this thing, then definitely the fourth thing that you have to keep in your mind is ethical consideration. So ethics are very important to keep in mind when you are going and doing this participant observation. Data collection and analysis. When you are in a position to collect data, then you have to see whether data is valid or not in the perspective of the subject, not the researcher. When you are collecting data, you have to keep in mind that is there any threats to validity of data, and you have to keep in mind also the perspective of the subjects rather than your own or researcher's perspective. And that is very important. Validity and subjects or perspective of those who were involved as participants. What is their observation? What is their view of looking at various things? Are you making them biased by including your own choice into it or your own perspective into it? If you are doing that, you have to avoid that, because that will lead you to bias analysis of your data, and that will also lead you to biasness in your data. So you have to distinguish between what a participant says about a particular thing when you do participant observation versus your own personal take on that particular matter. So this distinction, if maintained nicely, then definitely the data is less flawed, more valid, and the subjects or participants' viewpoint has got the maximum position in the data. What are the advantages of this whole process of participant observation? So it's good at explaining what is going on in particular social situation. It heightens the researcher's awareness of significant social process, and it is particularly useful for researchers working within their own organization. So these are three important advantages of conducting this participant observation. First is that when you live in a particular place for certain area and you try to observe as a participant not only the persons who are living there as your subjects, but also the society and community in which you are living, which you don't know before. So that will definitely a particular kind of nice experience that you are having in your life, and that will definitely increase your understanding of the subject you're working for. For example, if you want to see the people's behavior for various marketing tactics or marketing products, then definitely you will be in a good position to see the inside stories of whenever a new products come in the market. How do people at various levels of their life stages behave to this particular products? And when they are living in rural area where information is not that high, where education level is not that high, illiteracy is common, and all these things including poverty, how do people react to various products when they come into mind? For example, an advertisement on TV about providing microfinance to small farmers. How do people react to it? And if you want to observe, you have to live with them and see how do they behave when that advertisement comes to it, or when that information comes to them from one or the other source. So it gives you a good flavor of what is going on in a particular social situation, and it gives researcher a real flavor of what is going on. But when you are getting this real flavor by living with your subjects, one thing we have to keep always in mind as a researcher, that we have to distinguish between what is subject's perspective for that particular thing and what is researcher's perspective for that particular thing. So if we are in a position to distinguish these two things separately, that if something has happened, what was researcher's take on that and what was subject's take on that, then you will be in a better position to explain the social phenomena of participant observation and your own personal take on that particular thing. And that will definitely leads you to do less biased data and more valid data that has less threats to its validity, and your subject's observation are more profound in your analysis rather than your own personal take on that particular matter. Researchers' awareness of significant social process. So whatever significant social changes or processes are taking place, what is researchers' awareness about it? For example, the use of social media in Pakistan society nowadays is one of the very important topic that one can think of understanding, or that one can link. If you want to do your masters in management sciences, you definitely have to understand this phenomena as one of the most important phenomena nowadays happening in our society. This silent revolution, or this virtual this virtual revolution that is or electronic revolution that is taking place within our society, how does it affect the social relations? And how do you observe the people who use, let's say, Twitter or Facebook or Google or something else versus those who don't use? So you try to live with them those who use social media, what kind of lifestyle they have, what is particular about them, why they are using that particular site more often than others. So these are your social awareness levels that will definitely be increased when you go for that particular participant observation methodology. And it is particularly useful for researchers working within their own organization, because sometimes the organization is that large that you are unable to understand what department is doing what kind of functions, how do they behave, how do they act and react to this or that kind of rules and regulation within an organization. So it is also useful if you conduct this participant observation within your own organization to enhance the working relationship and to also increase the collaboration among various departments. So few more advantages are virtually whatever data you collect is useful, and some participant observation affords the opportunity for the researcher to the experience for real the emotions of those who are being researched. So you will be in a position to understand the real emotions of the people during various feelings, during various occasions. And the last thing is that virtually all data collected are useful. So whatever observation you have in your mind that you had during your stay at particular place as participant observer, that definitely is useful for by one or the other way. And this is one of the advantages of participant observation. What are the disadvantages? Of course, it is a slow process, so it can be a time consuming. It can pose difficult ethical dilemmas for the researchers. There can be high levels of role conflict for the researcher. The closeness of the researcher to the situation being observed can lead to significant observer bias. So these are few disadvantages of using this participant observation methodology of collecting data. No doubt it is one of the very useful way of collecting primary data, and it is also collecting data in depth with significant depth, and you observe the phenomena that normally you are unable to observe in qualitative data. This is how quantitative in quantitative data, this is how qualitative data can be more important in that particular sense than that of qualitative data. And the few disadvantages that we have with this participant observation using participant observation and collecting data, that it's a time consuming process, because you don't understand social interaction, social fabric of a society within a day or two. For that you have to live with them in that particular social setup for at least some period of time. And if you are living for there, definitely you have to get permission from your organization or institute that this research is going to take place this much time, so that you can have a well-focused research idea and participant observation, so that you can explain the phenomena in a more robust and better manner. So it can be time consuming. It can be time consuming in the sense that you need to have much time in the field with your subject to observe various social phenomena to understand the whole social fabric and how your subjects or participants behave when something is happening in their society or in their community where they are living. So there are ethical dilemmas that researchers can come across. You can get many examples. For example, there are cultures and customs where you have to follow, and if you are unable to follow that, that will definitely create some ethical dilemmas for you as a researcher, as an observer for the participant. And there can be a high level of role conflict for the researcher. So role conflict, you are unable to understand, either you are a researcher or at times you definitely feel yourself that I am human being, I have to do this or that for them. So this role conflict is also very important. Either you behave like a researcher, or at certain stages you might behave like a human being. So at that stage, whatever you observe might have some biasness in it, and that's where the fourth disadvantages comes in. The closeness of researcher to the situation being observed can lead to significant observer bias. That significant observer bias, if not distinguished from what is subject saying about that particular phenomena, actually leads to threats of validity of data. So if that leads to threats to validity of data, then definitely we'll be in a position not to conduct a robust analysis of our observation for the participants we observed. So these are some of the disadvantages of that particular methodology that leads us to a less reliable or less valid data collection process. The participant observer role is very demanding one, to which not all researcher will be suited, because you have to live in odd situations, you have to face odd situations, you have to have a level of patience and understanding of various phenomena of real life. So it might not be suitable for every and all researchers. Access to organizations may be difficult. So if you want to access an organization for which you want to observe the data or the participant, it might be difficult to have access to, or data recording is often very difficult for the researcher. So how do you record data? Maybe you are not allowed. If you are allowed, you record data. How do you observe it in a less biased way? So these are advantages that lead us to think once and twice before conducting this participant observation. And then we have structured observation. We have seen that there are two primary ways of conducting this primary data: participant observation, and then we have a structured observation. So structured observation has two important points that one has to consider. One is that it is systematic and aims to establish straightforward facts. The other is that due to proliferation of internet, the participant observation has the scope of this observational data collection methodology has widens. So these two things are very important to consider when you are doing this structured observation. What are the advantages of a structured observation? It can be used by anyone after suitable training in the use of the measuring instrument. Therefore, you could delegate this extremely time-consuming task. So after a little training, anyone can use this methodology of structured observations so that you can analyze the data. So you provide a little training to some people, you delegate the task to them to collect structured observation data for you, and that you can use for your analysis. And if you remember, we have also discussed that participant observation is qualitative way of collecting information, while a structured observation is quantitative way of collecting information. So what you do, you basically train people in establishing questionnaires and all kind of information things that is needed, and after that is established, you try to ask them to give them suitable codes and all that, so that you can understand everything and you can quantify them. See, for example, if you are interviewing male or female, you have to code them that if male is equal to 1, female is equal to 2. So you understand that whenever 1 comes means the participant was male, while 2 comes, then you understand that participant was female. So this you have to understand, and it is suitable if you give sufficient training for measuring instrument, then you can delegate the task easily. A structured observation may be carried out simultaneously in different locations. So that was not the case with participant observation, because as an observer you have to be at that particular location where you want to have observation from your subjects. But if you give training to various people for structured observations, what you can get out of it is that you can send them on various locations and they can collect data or information from there. This would present the opportunity of comparison between location. So same level of analysis you can conduct on various location, and then you can compare all these location by collecting and analyzing all the data that you have collected on various location. It should yield highly reliable results by virtue of its replicability. Because the data can be quantified, so it can be replicable, and hence it has more reliability level than the participant observation, because the personal bias element is also reduced, and if that is reduced, that definitely leads you to less biasness in your analysis, and it leads you to highly reliable results of your analysis. What are the other advantages of a structured observation? The easier the observation instruments to use and understand, the more reliable results will be. So whatever level of ease you can create in understanding or developing your instrument, highly reliable data you will get out of it. A structured observation is capable of more than simply observing the frequency of event. You can also not only observe the frequency of event, but you can do more than that. It is also possible to record the relationship between events. So if some events are taking place, and by looking at their frequency, you will be in a position to see relationship among various events. And because not only at one place, if you are collecting data on various places and the similar kind of happenings are occurring on various places with different or varying frequencies, then you can try to relate them and try to observe that events, and you are in a position or more capable to observe that particular event and its frequency. It's also possible to record relationship between events. You can also record relationships, and for example is the visit to the retail chemist's counter to present a prescription preceded by an examination of merchandise unrelated to the prescription transaction. So this is how you can basically give examples of structured observation. How do people react to this or that? How do people behave to particular situation? And you can also generate number of other examples for this structured observation analysis. So other advantages of structured observations are: the method allows collection of data at the time they occur in natural setting. There is no need to depend on second-hand accounts of phenomena from respondents who put their own interpretation on events. Structured observation secures information that most participants would ignore because to them it was too mundane or irrelevant. So these are some of the advantages. Let's see what the first says. The method allows the collection of data at the time they occur in their natural setting. Whenever something is happening, you actually ask and record them. Instead of taking observation, instead of observing participants' behavior, you actually ask and then you record the information. So method allows the collection of data at the time they occur in their natural setting. Therefore, there is no need to depend on second-hand information. So participant observation can depend on second-hand information, because you might observe something with your subjects, but there is some second-hand information that is there. But in structured observation, there is no dependence on second-hand information of phenomena from respondents who put their own interpretation to events. And structured observation secures information that most participants would ignore because for them it might be irrelevant. And you know that through your questionnaire you are going to ask this or that kind of question. So instead of ignoring what is irrelevant or mundane for them, you're basically asking questions that are relevant to your research questions and objectives, and in that way you will be in a better position to understand their social relationships, their social formations of social capital, and how these social fabrics work. In that fashion, you're also in a position to avoid the personal bias of the researcher that is present in participant observation. So these are some of the advantages of structured observation interviews. The disadvantages are that observer must be in research setting when the phenomena under study are taking place. Research results are limited to overt action or surface indicators from which the observer must make inferences. Data are slow and expensive to collect. So third point is very easy, that because you want to collect data on individual or household level basis by your own, by using one or the other questionnaire or interview guide, then you'll definitely have to wait until the full data is collected from one or the various locations. So it can be time consuming and definitely expensive. Secondly, research results are limited to overt action or surface indicators from which the observer must make inferences. So you definitely have to analyze the things that are happening in front of you at that particular time. So that can lead you to biasness in your analysis or results. And research observer must be in the research setting when the phenomena under study are taking place. So if you want to observe a particular phenomena, for example, how do people behave during election campaigns, you have to be there during that particular time period so that you can observe how do people behave. If you are not there, then definitely you will miss them. And if you want to be there, you have to wait until that time comes and you can observe structurally what is happening there in that particular setting. Structure observation, data collection and analysis, choosing an off-the-shelf coding schedule. I've told you that we have to understand how this coding can help to understand things. For example, for gender we have male, female, but how do we understand male and female when we analyze data? We definitely code them. So we code them, male is equal to 1 and female is equal to 2. So instead of writing male, female in our Excel sheet where we are entering data, we definitely add 1 in front of male and 2 in front of female. Designing your own coding schedule. We have to code and we design a coding schedule for our own data collection beforehand so that we understand if we get data, how do we quantify them, right? So this is how we actually understand the off-the-shelf coding schedule, combining both types of schedule. Number 1, designing coding schedule, and number 2, choosing off-the-shelf coding schedule. And use simple, manual or complex method of analysis. You can be in a position to use simple or you are in a position to use complex methods of analysis because data is quantifiable, it is in numbers, so you'll be in a good position to use or analyze these numbers to get your desired results which are relevant to your research questions and objectives. So a structure observation can be, there can be following threats to validity and reliability: subject error, time error, observer effects and strategies to overcome this, habituation and minimal interaction. Because there is minimal interaction between a researcher and the subject, then it might have some threats to validity and reliability of data. You only ask questions, people reply to that, and then you record their answer. It might be that they are not informing you fully. Secondly, you are unable to understand what is lying behind this whole phenomena of change. So this is how it leads to habituation and minimal interaction. Subject error, that is where the people who want to inform you, so for example, if you ask them what is your income, they might give a biased answer to it. So subject error is there. Time error can also be there. It might be that people don't have much time, or if they tell you that about their age or something, they might give you a wrong, not relatively right answer. For example, if you ask when did you born, especially in rural areas of Pakistan, we have this problem that people don't record dates or time. So if you ask them when you are born, then definitely it leads you to not very reliable answer. So this can have a threat to validity and reliability of the data in structured observation. So we have seen that there are ways in primary data, in collecting primary data, and within that we have two kind of data collection methodology: participant observation and structured observation. And we have seen what is the advantages and disadvantages of participant observation and structured observation, and how do we collect and analyze data, what kind of threats of reliability and validity data can get when we do participant observation or we do structured observation. So before we end, I'll just summarize this lecture that participant observation is used in a wide range of social settings. Within a social setting, if there are differences, if there are things that are changing and happening, we can also use participant observation. Participant observation means adopting a number of potential roles. So within that you have to have a maximum number of roles so that you can perform nicely, you can observe your subjects nicely, your interaction level determines what kind of information you are going to get, and roles are differentiated according to the degree of concealed identity and participation in events adopted by the researcher. So what kind of events you are reluctant not to go, what kind of events you are happy to participate. So this is how it determines the participation, and how do you distinguish your role, and what kind of degree concealed your identity. So these are some important things when it comes to participant observation. The aim of the main aim of the participant observation is to develop theory and avoid mere storytelling. So whenever you observe social phenomena, social community interaction within that particular social fabric, you try to link that with the theory that exists. How do people react or behave to one or the other kind? For example, Chai's theory that tells you why and how do people choose this or that kind of schooling. For example, in rural Pakistan, whether people go for private schooling, public schooling, or madrasa school. What determines a family's choice for their kids of a particular school? So that is very important when it comes to participant observation, and that's the aim of participant observation, is to link theory with the observations that you had rather than telling merely stories. Structured observation is concerned with the frequency of events. We have already seen that participant observation is qualitative in nature, while structured observation is quantitative in nature, because we want to see the frequency of an events occurring. It is characterized also by high levels of predetermined structured and quantitative analysis. So we have pre-structured, predetermined questionnaire based on which we try to collect data, and then we actually try to analyze that data. The main threats to reliability and validity are subject error, time error, and observer effect. The subject error, we also seen that if you ask some sensitive question, you might not get right answer or you get biased answer. Time error, so it might be that they don't record time, so it might be that they are not in a position to tell you the things that are accurate in their time and date. And observer effect, whatever you observe, it might be misleading or biased when you do your analysis. Before I end up, I would like to emphasize that this is one of the very important thing that we have to understand, that primary data and its way of collection, especially participant observation and structured observation, are two important aspects of data collection. And before we go into the field, we have to understand the basic theory and understanding of this particular research method, so that we can move further in a less biased way and we can collect more reliable and valid data. So we have also seen that we have differences between participant observation and structured observation. Participant observation is a way in which we do qualitative data. Nature of data is not quantitative, and structured observation in which we do quantitative data, we quantify them because we see the frequency of the events in quantitative data, and we see the real observation in participant observation. So these are differences that we have to keep in mind. Of course, one of the most important disadvantage of participant observation is personal bias that is in there when you collect data, because as a researcher, when you involved in daily lives of the people, you'll definitely have some soft corner for them when it comes to pain. You'll definitely have some enjoyment element in it when it comes to pleasure. So what you do is, instead of observing at certain particular events, you become part of it, and when you become part of it, you will not be in a position to distinguish between your role as a research observer and how do your subject behave in that particular situation. So if this is the case, you will not be in a position to determine how people as a participant in your research behaves to that particular event. So this might lead you to a less reliable and less valid data or information collection on part of researcher, particularly in participant observation. One thing. The second thing that is very important way of introducing bias in the analysis is that as an outsider in a particular social circumstances, you might not be indulged into social activities as openly as possible. So if there is a curtain of less friendly behavior retains between the researcher and the subject, then definitely the level of observation might be biased, or the level of observation that you have is not true according to what is happening as a social system or social fabric in that particular society, and you will not be in a position to come up with your valid, reliable information, and that also introduces a personal or researcher's bias into the valid data collection. And this is how it leads to a disadvantage when it comes to structured observation. In a structured observation, what as a researcher you do is to see the frequency of particular events, how they are happening. And the disadvantage relative to participant observation in a structured observation is that you hardly have any observation for that particular frequency of events. You just want to know the numbers, you want to quantify them, and you try to analyze that data for your own research for answering your own research questions and objectives. And if this is the case, both these elements of primary data collection has some bias in them, and that can also have some impact on your data analysis and interpreting results. One is that you can introduce personal bias into your participant observation. The other is that you might not have an observation that helps you to understand the real life phenomena in its true sense. So these are very important points that one has to keep in their mind and has to understand these differences when you have participant observation versus a structured observation. So keeping the disadvantages and advantages in mind, if you are choosing one or the other methodology for your data collection, you have to keep in mind that whether your organization or institutes allows you to do that. If yes, whether you have resources and time for that, because time is very important in both these ways of data collection, and also whether you have fulfilled your research goals and aims that you have set up, and if it is the case, whether you are in a position to answer the research question that you have for your research proposal or dissertation. If you have something positive with you for these things, then you can choose one or the other method to collect your data and analyze it, and try to reduce biases by introducing ethical framework and consideration in your study, and ethical consideration and framework in your data collection methodology. I stop here, and I hope we will see these things later in details. Thank you very much.